Well, thanks everybody for coming. And I was telling Matt earlier, if you have questions or comments, please just do put them in the chat. I was telling him I tend to get really excited about this content, and I'm not totally used to presenting virtually, so I don't see people's hands or faces. Like if you have something to say, I get kind of carried away and just kind of keep going. So I asked him to please interrupt me if something comes up. So if something comes up and you have a comment or a question, please just type it in, and then Matt will say something to me and I will respond. So thanks again for coming. This is Cultivating a Culture of Student Data Privacy. We are sharing the link for this slideshow. It's also in this bit.ly form right here. This is me. I'm the Director of Technology and Information Services up in the northern suburb of Wheeling, School District 21. We're a K-8 district. And I was thinking about why student data privacy is so important. And I was happy to see there's several teachers here in this webinar today, because I feel like teachers aren't really given enough information. And so I want to help kind of spread the word and talk about why student data privacy is important for everyone to think about. And I was thinking about who's affected. And so these first three are pictures of me at different ages of my school career. Here I was probably kindergarten or first. This was 5th or 6th, and then this was 8th grade. And then these are my two daughters who are currently in high school. So all of our students, whether they're K all the way up through 12, they're affected by their data being shared and by being stored by us. And so these are the students who we are trying to help and protect by being aware of student data privacy. And the reason why I got interested in this, because I am extremely interested in this. And data privacy and violations of data privacy are all around us. So there's constantly news stories, whether in the field of education or externally in other industries, but data privacy concerns are everywhere. And so I started kind of collecting news articles and thinking about things. And I actually did this cohort by Future of Privacy Forum called Train the Trainer. And if you have an opportunity to look into doing that, it is a really great professional development, and really you learn from some of the industry experts on privacy. And so I also for a long time was our district app and website vetter. So people would say, I don't know if you can use this website, just ask Alicia and she'll tell you. And so I would just look at terms of service and privacy policy and then kind of do my best. But now that we have SOPA, the Illinois law that we'll talk about in a little bit, it's a lot more straightforward. And so that also kind of has spurred me on to learning more about data privacy. So today's agenda, we'll talk a little bit about why it matters in the first place. We'll do some definitions, look at some of the most important laws. We'll talk about ethics and equity and the difference between those. We'll also look at some different scenarios of like real world, what do you do in this situation? And then also what you can do for advocacy on your own, whether you're a teacher or administrator, but there's a lot of stuff you can do. So first of all, why does it matter? There are three main categories of risk to schools and districts if data privacy isn't taken into consideration. First of all, there could be actual harm to students. So if some data privacy rules are violated, students can come to physical, emotional, or reputational harm. There also can be legal consequences for your school or district. So if you don't comply with federal or state privacy laws, you could face fines, lawsuits, etc. And then finally, and some probably superintendents would say most importantly, it could be an absolute PR disaster. So probably all of us can think of examples from the news of schools or districts or companies that have had some major PR disasters because of security flaws. For actual harm to students, they can be harmed by commercialization, so having advertisers get a hold of their data and target ads to them. Equity concerns. Some of our students only have access to school devices and school networks. They don't go home and aren't able to use other accounts or use other parent devices. So they're only able to use devices and accounts that maybe are monitored by the district. So this presents some equity concerns. Social harm potentially, if some sensitive information gets out from data that the school collected, it could result in stigmatization and bullying. Too much surveillance, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, can also have chilling effects on students. So if we want students to feel comfortable and safe doing research into not only school projects, but also information that they personally want and need, knowing or thinking that they're going to be 24/7 monitored could have a chilling effect on their willingness to explore and get the information that they need. It could also, data that is collected could become part of a student's permanent record. It could result in loss of opportunity if certain information gets out about students. It could result in them being prevented from attending colleges or from getting jobs. They could access inappropriate age content. And then finally, some sensitive information could be released that could actually endanger students in several different ways. And so some definitions. I like this graphic. It's kind of busy, so I'm just going to focus on one part of it. But this is a nice graphic because it helps us understand and think about all of the different kinds of data that we are constantly collecting for and about students. This kind of data is PII, personally identifiable data. And so here, if you just look at this part of the graphic, we're thinking about types of data. First of all, teachers. We as teachers collect a lot of different kinds of data on students, from observational data or data about engagement. Students themselves generate data from homework and from working in learning apps that collect data. We as a district, through registration, collect a ton of demographic data: age, race, gender, economic status, special education needs. Also actions of students, so their attendance, their discipline, extracurriculars, etc. And then finally, of course, we collect a ton of academic information: testing, grades, enrollment, graduation, etc. So this is a lot of different data, and it's no longer just stored in some filing cabinets. It's stored in the cloud. And because it's stored in the cloud, it's so much easier for a lot of individual people who have access to this kinds of data to usually accidentally kind of give the key to bad actors, or to unintentionally share data in a way that isn't ethical or equitable, whether it's on purpose or not. So this is more of like a visual graphic that I just wanted you to see. If you are involved in SOPA, and we'll talk about SOPA, that's what's the Illinois law that says every vendor that collects student data, whether it's name, email address, like anything, we have to have a data privacy agreement signed with that vendor, that each school does. And as part of that data privacy agreement, there's this Exhibit B, schedule of data. And so vendors have to indicate by these little checks or X's what data they collect. Some, like learning platforms, might only collect name and student's grade and maybe like their username, not a lot of data. But some, like this is Embrace IEP, which many districts use that or something similar. This collects a ton of data. So I just want you to look at that last column and all the pages that has all the X's. So in Embrace IEP, they pretty much collect any kind of data that there is out there. And that makes sense because it's for IEPs. And so you need to have a lot of different kinds of sensitive data. But I just wanted to show you that this one single vendor has all of the sensitive data, like special education status, any kind of like medical health information, low income status, English language status, all kinds of things like that. That's one vendor. most districts have, hundreds of vendors that collect all different amounts of information. So it's a little bit sobering when you think about it. And it just kind of underscores the need for really thinking about it and making sure that we have good data governance policies in place. So just a definition of data privacy. It's a fundamental right that is recognized by the US Constitution, by the UN Declaration of Human Rights, and by many countries around the world. Data privacy is also about control of your data, how your data is used and shared. Data privacy is also subjective. So I have unique privacy preferences and expectations for how my data, I feel comfortable how I have that being used out in the world. But Matt or Melinda or Mike or Tommy, anybody else, we all have different kind of comfort levels with what we are willing to share privacy wise. And then finally, data privacy is contextual and it changes with decades or countries. You might feel more comfortable sharing data about yourself that maybe your parents or grandparents would never have wanted shared. People that were born here in the United States might feel more comfortable sharing some kinds of data than maybe students or families that are coming, let's say, from Russia or Ukraine or from India or from any other country that maybe contextually has different expectations or beliefs about data privacy. So student data privacy refers to the responsible, ethical, and equitable collection, use, sharing, and protection of student data. And that comes from the Student Privacy Compass. So some of the most important laws, the top three, in my opinion, most important laws for teachers and administrators to know about are FERPA, SOPA, and PPRA. The bottom two, COPA, this is just for websites and vendors. That's on them. They have to make sure they're not collecting PII without parent permission. That's on vendors. SEPA, this is just saying in order to get government E-rate money, we have to filter, we have to do some monitoring, and we have to provide digital citizenship education. That's your tech department. But we as teachers, we need to be aware of FERPA, SOPA, PPRA. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act from 1974. It gives parents the rights to their children's educational records, and that's the right to review, correct, and give permission to share. Obviously, if we had to ask parents for permission to share every single little piece of data, we would never be able to do school. So the permission to share has an exception, and that's the school official exception. You as teachers are acting as school officials, administrators are, many of your vendors are also considered to be school officials because they have a legitimate educational interest in the student data. So something to know there. SOPA, what you need to know as teachers is really just now your districts may not allow you to use any vendor that collects data from students unless there's a data privacy agreement in place. So your district, if you're in Illinois, should have a list of those vendors. And if you don't see a vendor that you want to use or a website you want to use that does collect student information, you need to reach out. Many schools have like a suggest or a request that then your school can look up. But that's really important for you as teachers just to make sure you're in compliance. Finally, PPRA is the Protection of People Rights Amendment. This is more obscure, but I wanted to include it because it's all about surveys and questions you can and cannot ask in surveys. And so I did not know this until I did this Train the Trainer Future of Privacy Forum cohort, but there are 8 protected topics that you cannot ask students without some kind of permissions. And so I put this on there because I know with so much focus on SEL, teachers are often kind of coming up with surveys for students. And I just want everyone to know that there are certain topics that you can't ask students about. And so just to kind of be aware of that. Also, this is more of the did you know, because I thought it was interesting. This is a brand new public act in Illinois state law that now requires districts to collect and report de-identified, so not personally identified, sexual orientation and gender identity data. So the state is now collecting that data, again, not connected to individual students, but they want that data. So districts will have to consider how best to collect it and then how to protect it. All right, student data privacy in the news. There are so many news stories out there. Like if you start being aware of it, you'll see them everywhere. So Wake Schools, North Carolina, this was a few years ago, but they sent out a batch of postcards, like physical postcards that had social security numbers of students printed on the actual postcards. Not good. Washington, DC, a few years ago, accidentally uploaded private data of 12,000 special education students. Down here, Pearson. So chances are good that your school where you work also was exposed in the Pearson hack. So this is like if you use Ames Web or other Pearson learning platform products, they had a data breach a few years ago. And so you might have had your data shared during that. Lots of ransomware attacks. That's where basically hackers break into your system and they hold your systems for ransom. In such cases, your school might pay, or you're not supposed to, but sometimes organizations do actually pay to then get their systems unlocked again. Just in January of last year, there was a cyber attack in Albuquerque. School had to cancel classes. And because of that, I thought this was interesting. New Mexico as a state actually proposed a $45 million school cybersecurity fund to help schools get their cybersecurity bulked up, which I thought was great because schools don't typically have, extra cash laying around for things. Many schools now have built-in cybersecurity funding, but I think it's important that the state recognizes this is a really important problem that affects not just schools, but really affects the entire state and its citizenry. I'm not going to show the video, but I wanted to include it in the slide deck for you. You might remember a few years ago, Rockford Public Schools, I think it was 2019, they had a huge ransomware attack and they were shut down for a while. And Jason Barthel, he was the director, he's the CIO, CTO of Rockford Public Schools. He's done a really nice job in the years since, kind of going around and speaking at conferences. This is a radio interview that he gave about what they've learned, what happened and lessons learned so they can prevent it from happening again. So I thought that was a nice public service that Rockford Public Schools have done for the rest of us. Unsurprisingly, the pandemic increased cybersecurity incidents. 2020 was kind of the biggest year for school hacks, partly because more technology was being used by more people. As people became decentralized in their homes, account privileges got kind of spread out and more people got more account privileges since they weren't all together in a building. The more people you give access to things, the more potential you have for data privacy problems. Down here is a pie chart that just breaks down in 2020 the different kinds of attacks or reasons for you had data privacy issues. DDoS attacks, phishing, 12% were the ransomware attacks I mentioned earlier. I thought 36% was interesting. This is in yellow. This is data breach or leaks, which means they were people, staff members who accidentally did something that caused a cybersecurity incident. So that's over a third of all cyber incidents in 2020 were caused by human error. So that kind of goes towards my later point of advocacy and awareness. And then here there was an alert put out for Homeland Security and the FBI, just talking about how in 2020, cyber actors were intentionally targeting K-12 distance learning education to steal data and cause disruptions. If you haven't seen this before, this is the K6, oops, did I not have that? It's a really cool map. I'm just gonna go to it really quick. Let's see, move that out of the way. Cyber incident map. It's by K-12-6 organization. And then you can actually zoom in, and then you can look at different incidents. You can hover over and it'll tell you what happened. So I thought this was really interesting by Milwaukee. If you click on it, so here, they lost $843,000 because a district employee got an email from someone saying they were this bank, which it was a fake email address. And so the district employee sent like an ACH payment form to this fake bank address. And then the bank sent like a fake routing number, fake bank account number. And so basically, because the staff member did this and engaged with this person who was doing some phishing, the school district was out $843,000. So it's a fascinating map to look at because it gives you examples and details of different things that happened. And of course, I had to look to see what happened near me. So I'm right by Arlington Heights. And so this is our high school district, 214. It's not funny, but it kind of made me laugh a little bit. So on April 30th of 2021, a student rickrolled his high school district by hacking every networked display in every school. And they have like 3 or 4 high schools. So not funny, but a little bit. If you're not sure what rickrolling is, you can Google it. But anyway, it's sobering to see all of the cyber incidents that are happening all around the country. So student data privacy, ethics, and equity concerns. So data ethics and data equity, they're 2 different but related topics. So data ethics, these are the guiding principles for how stakeholders should govern, use, and protect data. Examples are setting policies for what data can be collected, how long it can be retained, who can access it, and why you're collecting it. So districts really are supposed to have data governance policies that distinguish inappropriate and appropriate use, and that also communicate how data can be collected, used, etc. Data equity, on the other hand, this is talking about using data to understand structural and systemic educational barriers and taking actions to improve those structures and systems. So equitable data practices include looking and auditing your data and your data systems to assess and remediate bias and discrimination. So is the data you're collecting somehow amplifying bias or discrimination? And then identifying and addressing achievement, resource, and opportunity gaps using data. That's a great way to use data. And then also, and this is really big, communicating with students and families about the ethical, responsible use of their data. That's part of data privacy that we talked about in the beginning, is telling people like what you're doing with their data and how you're protecting it. This is kind of for your reference. There are 2 different 10-point statements that I found that are great for if you're like as a district wanting to adopt some data principles. These are great places to start. This one on the left was made by COSIN and the Data Quality Campaign. So it's 10 statements of belief regarding student data privacy and ethics. This one on the right, 10 statements that were developed by civil rights, disability rights, privacy, and education organizations. This is more about what they believe about using data equitably. So I feel like the 2 together are a really good kind of way to think about ethics and equity when it comes to data. Something that we really don't tend to think about a whole lot. All right, this is where I love to get into some actual specific things that you might be encountering in your schools and districts. So first of all, student monitoring. And examples of student monitoring are Bark, Gaggle, GoGuardian, Lightspeed, and Securely. And when I talk about student monitoring in this sense, I'm not talking about filters, and I'm not talking about like a GoGuardian where you're just monitoring kids during their class period and the teacher is able to close tabs and, lock everyone's screen so they have to look up at the front of the room. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more of the 24/7 background monitoring for self-harm, violence, bullying, drugs, sex, etc. And so First, we have to ask, why do students monitor student digital activities in the first place? Number one, safety. We want to keep kids safe. We want to keep our schools safe. Two, compliance. So some schools interpret the SEPA law of needing to do some kind of monitoring to meaning like we have to monitor everything all the time. And then community concerns to show the community that we are concerned about student safety and we're taking concrete steps to support student safety. What types of student data are monitored? The actual devices, an internet connection that the students might be using, and then school apps and accounts. So like Google Apps if you're a Google Apps district, possibly Microsoft apps if you're Microsoft, or any apps that are like student learning apps that the school monitors and has like a dashboard for. Student data, how could it be used? First, there's an analysis that happens. And so these programs all have different keywords or phrases that are set up to be flagged. And so it could be words that are associated with self-harm, bullying, violence, sex, sexual abuse, alcohol, drugs. When the system flags something, an action can be taken. And so depending on the nature and severity of what was flagged, a student could receive just like an automated warning, or the content, if a student is trying to access content, it could be blocked. And then finally, school staff might be notified. And so typically schools that have these have like a whole protocol. Like if I get a notification, I tell these people who tell these people, and it kind of goes up from there. So I like to just take a minute and think, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat. I'm curious if your districts or schools use self-harm monitoring software. If you do, if you could just pop in what you use. My school district uses Securely currently. And I just did like a survey of my regional, like Northern Illinois districts, and it looked like almost everybody was using something, which I thought was interesting. So I'm just going to continue here. Okay, Securely in Evanston, Skokie 65. And so this like section when I'm talking about these self-harm / student monitoring platforms, it's not like they're bad or they're good. It's just there's a lot of things that we need to think about that I think when we adopt these, we don't think about and we don't talk about. So I'm kind of bringing this stuff up because it's good food for thought and it's good conversation to have. So the downsides of I'll just say really quick, I see Matt's question, what are other schools using? In the Northern Chicago area, I would say the biggest ones people were using were Bark and Gaggle and Securely. And then to a lesser extent, Lightspeed. And I feel like there might have been something else. But those were like very in pretty high use where I am here in Chicago. So the downsides of student self-harm monitoring software. Students can be mistakenly flagged. They might be doing a report on Sylvia Plath and then have been researching suicide or self-harm. Students can be unfairly treated. If adults find out what they were flagged for or what was going on, students could suffer unintended consequences. Students can be subjected to excess scrutiny. Okay, well, with this kid, we know he was looking this up, so we need to make sure we watch him. That's not the intended use of these programs, but that's something that can happen. They can have mental health details inappropriately disclosed. Again, if there was some kind of incident that happened and some kind of self-harm was triggered or bullying was triggered, depending on how that data and that information was spread among the staff, that could have negative consequences. Students needlessly could be put in contact with law enforcement, social services, and school disciplinarians. Excessive discipline is one of the major concerns about this kind of software because it's not intended for discipline. These platforms would tell you that, but that is an unintended consequence, is that students that get flagged often are then triggered for disciplinary consequences. Students can have sensitive personal information shared. And again, it could be, students could experience that chilling effect where people stop looking up information that they need or doing things that they really need to do because they're just afraid of being constantly monitored. The Future of Privacy Forum put out an excellent report called The Privacy and Equity Implications of Using Self-Harm Monitoring Technologies, Recommendations for Schools. And again, this isn't saying don't use them, they're bad. It's more like there's some really serious unintended consequences of using these haphazardly. So here are some recommendations for using them safely and appropriately. Okay. Let's see, I feel like, did I skip something? No. Okay, that's all right. Other modern dilemmas are biometrics, facial recognition. So this was from a New York incident a couple of years ago. A school in New York put in facial recognition just so they had an idea of who was on campus. A family sued and a judge blocked it. They put a moratorium on facial recognition in schools in New York until further studies could be made. And this is what I mean when I say this stuff is everywhere in the news. Just today, I was listening to the Daily podcast by the New York Times, and they were talking about facial recognition software. And so Madison Square Garden in New York uses facial recognition software, ostensibly for safety, to make sure that people that are coming into the garden are not on like a federal watch list. But they also have been using it for to kind of get back at their corporate enemies. And so they have a list of a few law firms in New York that are currently engaged in some different litigation against Madison Square Garden. So Madison Square Garden went and they took the lawyers' pictures off of the law firms' websites and they put it onto their facial recognition software watch list. And there was a woman who was trying to go to a Mariah Carey concert at the Garden in December, and she got pulled because her face was pulled off of her law firm's website. It was on this watch list of their corporate enemies. She was denied entry. And so there's really a possibility of these types of AI or facial recognition, being used in ways that they really weren't intended for use. But just like a side note, good news is that Illinois and Texas are the only two states that prevent any venues from using facial recognition software without consent. So you can go to any venue in Chicago and be, able to get in, even if you're on some kind of like corporate enemy list, because they cannot use facial recognition software. All right, and then also voice assistants in the classroom, Alexa's, Google Home. I know there's been talk about these being potentially great to use in the classroom, but there's also some privacy considerations. So here, useful tool or privacy problem. Wearable technologies, Fitbits, those heart rate monitors. So again, this is another Future of Privacy Forum post about wearable technologies. So these are all things that we're seeing, and it's very exciting, to get all this cool technology into schools, but it is important to stop and think, okay, what are the privacy implications of this? This is different than anything we've had before. So I think we need to think about it differently and talk about it differently. I'm going to skip through these and just kind of talk about that at the very end. So student data privacy advocacy, what can you do? You can check yourself, make sure you're straight, teach your students, be transparent with parents, and educate your staff. So to check yourself, passphrases are the strongest. I recently learned that, but you can Google it. It's really interesting. So if you have like a passphrase of random words, that's the strongest, most unbeatable password that you can do. Pay attention to privacy policies and terms of service. Know FERPA and SOPA. What information are you allowed to share and with whom? And then SOPA, make sure you're only using websites that collect student info, that your school is on a list at your school, that it's okay. Learn your district policies. Maybe ask, do we have any district policies about, collecting student data? When in doubt, ask principal, cabinet member, anybody above you, and then they'll be able to find out for you. Teach your students. Common Sense has my absolute favorite digital citizenship curriculum and activities. They have every single grade level from K to 12 has activities and curriculum. And it's one of their 6 subjects that have like different activities for and curriculum for. One of the 6 subjects is privacy and security. So there's privacy and security activities you can do with K all the way up through 12. Be Internet Awesome by Google also has some really neat games and things for privacy and data security. Be transparent with parents. A lot of this is on your tech department, so they probably already have this page for SOPA of listing all the vendors. The good thing to know is that just because you list all the vendors that you use, parents are not allowed or not legally permitted to request not to use certain things. So it's not like, oh, I don't like the way 4 of these sound, I don't want my kid to use them. That's not how it works. It's more just for transparency. Educate your staff. And if you're a teacher, this might just be literally talking to your colleagues who probably don't know a whole lot about data privacy. So if you are in a team meeting and someone's like, oh, let me just share all of my special ed student diagnoses and 504s and IEPs with you, because I don't really know how to work with this, or just take a look at all the people that I've got in my class this year. I think it's stuff that happens a lot where it's real casual, like, oh, we're colleagues, you know, you see everything about my kids, vice versa. That's actually not how it goes. So your friend doesn't have an educational interest in those students. You really can only share that information maybe with the nurse or with someone who's a special ed coordinator to your school. So it's really important to think about what data you have, and like really you want to give that data to the least amount of people as possible. Definitely ask your IT department admins, do we have data governance policies? There is an article which I'll link in here with your superintendent, for your superintendent. It's just like, dear superintendent, here's what you should know about data privacy. Encourage your IT department to do phishing awareness campaigns. They're kind of fun and they really work. So it's kind of like testing, not tricking, but testing your staff to see, you know, have them practice getting some weird emails that they have to then decide what to do with. If you see anything unsafe happening, talk to your principal or tech people about addressing those practices. Regular staff trainings. Your district might also consider requiring multi-factor authentication. My district just did that. We were like prepared for the worst, for people to like revolt, but honestly it was fine. And I think everybody is just using their phone. Nobody is wanting to use like the paper codes or anything, but it's just another level of protection, just because we as teachers and staff and admins have access to so much data. And so, you know, it's worth kind of like a little extra step. And then one last thing, we won't really go through these, but I want you to see what you have access to in this slide deck. If you ever want to try like table talk activities with your staff. So this is from the Student Privacy Forum. They've come up with these different scenarios. Like this scenario is about a basketball coach who says, hey, students, everybody on the team, download this cool app. You do video of you dribbling, and then we can all like look at each other and compete and all of that. Pretty cool. But then they get a notification that some personal data was stolen from this app via a breach. What should the coach do? Like, who does he tell? What does he do? And then would it change if the app was allowed by the district, or if the district didn't know the coach was using this? And then what I love about this is the Student Data Privacy Forum, they have responded to the scenario. They're like, here's how we see the situation. Here's some more questions to ask. And then at the bottom, here are the unintended consequences of this situation. Another one is administering SEL, well-being student surveys. What should you do before you administer one? And then here's their response. This one is like, if you have a student and you think they might have dyslexia, who can you say that to? What info can you share with different people? Who should you talk to about that? This is their response. And then finally, you as a teacher want to assign a documentary project. So you ask them to go and film their home life, film, you know, what's going on at home. Okay, well, here are some questions. And then here's how the Future of Privacy Forum, Student Data Privacy, think about that and what are some unintended consequences of that kind of an activity. Maybe here's some ways you can adapt it. So lots of great information. Again, I hope you find this as interesting as I do, because there's just so much there. And then I have several slides full of resources. All of my articles and references are listed here. So that's really it. Does anybody have any questions or comments at all about this? And feel free to reach out to me anytime later.